Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Museum in Springfield, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. Now, you may have come to this wonderful place, or you may not have, and if you have come here, you will not have had the opportunity to see it the way you're going to see it today, because the designer of the exhibits in this space is here to give us a personal tour. Bob Rogers of BRC Company, and that is BRC Imaginative Arts, is here to tell us and show us some of his favorite places and some of the concepts behind how these exhibits came to life. And Bob, what a terrific opportunity. You're here to celebrate the 10th anniversary.
Absolutely.
A friend who was involved in getting this museum off the ground said, well, let's see if we can get Bob to give you a tour, and voila, here you are.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. The tour starts, I guess, here with the classic image of the log cabin juxtaposed against the White House. And an early concern, one of the historians asked, won't people get confused about which one to see first? And no, I don't think anybody will think that Lincoln was born in the White House and moved to a log cabin.
Right.
Not exactly a success story. Mm-hmm. But I suppose the best way to see it is to start with the log cabin. Can I show you over there?
Let's do that.
The foliage and the trees around the log cabin are a specific season, a specific time of year. The bird calls that you hear in this area are the birds that would have been there that exact day of the year. The trees, the flowers, the blooming plants, everything is absolutely authentic. The trees were taken, there were molds taken from trunks of trees in southern Indiana where the cabin really originally was, so that there was, when we first opened, there was an absolute twin for every single tree.
Oh my goodness.
And oh, by the way, some of these trees, they're all false, but some of these trees are hiding structural columns that are holding up the roof. So that all had to be artfully blended into this. A lot of people comment on the fact that this log cabin, which is not Lincoln's original log cabin, long lost, this log cabin actually totally feels and looks exactly like a 200-year-old log cabin. And they ask how we achieved that effect. And we tell them, well, we were very tricky. We built it out of a 200-year-old log cabin.
You stole a
which
log
we
cabin.
found. Well, no, we found one.
It.
We found one in a drying or in storage in a tobacco shed, someplace, and I think it was in Kentucky or Tennessee. And we bought it and had it reworked. So that's why it's everything about this place is as authentic as we possibly
Let me get this
make
straight.
it.
You and your researchers have to go to southern Indiana, take molds of the barks of these trees so that you can create those, and know which birds were present, and then recreate those sounds as well. And that's all here for the visitor here. They just have to keep their ears and eyes open to know that.
Well, hopefully they're not focused on that. They're not focused on the art. Today, I'm going to deconstruct some of these things for you, but hopefully the visitor is swept up in the emotions of the story and thus becoming more connected permanently to the life and times of Abraham Lincoln. That's our real objective. But today, we're sort of letting you in behind the scenes, showing you the magician's secrets. We don't really want people to come in and admire the fact that this really is a 200-year-old cabin, or say, oh, I recognize that tree from the last time I was in southern Indiana. It's more that it just ought to feel real and feel right, so that they can be swept up in the story.
So let's go see where Lincoln would have done his first reading and where he would have first lived. Bob, young Abe would have grown up in a cabin, probably a one-room cabin with a lot of people in it, and it's hard to get some time to learn to read, isn't it? When you're
Well, I guess so. Here we sort of deliver on one of the expected cliches of Lincoln, because Lincoln's life is full of not just the cliches that we all learned in grade school, but also some astonishing contradictions of those cliches. So at the beginning of the story, we start by delivering on what most people believe they already know about Abe. And here, reading by the dying embers of the fire is one of those things that everybody believes they know about Abe. And as far as we know, it's true, but then there is so much more to experience and learn about Abe Lincoln.
You got to bring people into this concept gradually, so you start out with something kind of simplistic, like you say, what you expect, you think you know. And then you get surprised later on in the tour, don't you?
Absolutely, that's the idea. You set up with by delivering what they expect, and then you contradict it. Here in the slave auction, one of the striking features is that your first sight of it, you come around the corner and the auctioneer is looking right into your eyes, looking for the next bid. It makes you part of the feeling of guilt, and it makes you involved in the scene. If I deconstruct this for you a little bit, you'll notice that there are 6 figures here. There are 3 slave traders or slave auctioneers, and they are all white on and gray on gray figures, no full flesh tones. It's the black family that's real. Their flesh tones are complete. They are 3 different shades of black, because not all black people are the same, and the lighting on them is full spectrum, full color lighting, so they become real and pop forward, whereas a completely different set of lights are shining on the illuminating the slave auctioneers, and that's all monster movie lighting, you know, from underneath with red and things like that. And that helps to bring out the emotional power of what's going on. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out exactly how to work this. And the inspiration came from one of our historians, Edna Greed Medford, who was a historian, a black historian, and she said that the real tragedy of slavery was the breakup of the black family, and that was the inspiration for this scene. And this was one of the things that is typical of what Lincoln might have seen on his trip down the Mississippi to New Orleans.
Yeah, and he would have been quite young at that time. It was before his time in New Salem, and he was starting to form his opinions and standards about slavery and the whole issue. Wow.
Let's walk in here to the store in New Salem.
I just mentioned New Salem, yeah, and here we are.
And the Lincoln seems to be talking there with a figure that represents Anne Rutledge, whom some people think was his first love. And notice here that we're not looking into a diorama about this. We are in it. We are in the store.
That's right.
Wherever possible, we want to put you into Lincoln's life rather than simply showing it to you. A little further along, we come to the courting couch.
Oh,
and
sure.
Here we see a very ambitious and successful and somewhat uptight Mary being courted by this really downright geeky guy. You wonder, what on earth did she see in him? And you know, the volunteers here love the Lincolns, so they're constantly coming around, sometimes undoing our work. We had Lincoln's tie crooked, which he never could tie a tie and make it straight. If you look at his photos,
right, I see his photos.
You know right away whether Mary accompanied him to that photographic session, because if his tie is straight, she was there. And so, but the volunteers and the maintenance people are constantly trying to help Abe by straightening his tie. I think after we get done here today, I will turn it slightly sideways for them to adjust it back to its original. Another favorite that people really, really like is the Lincoln Law Office. And this is based on a real scene that's described in Herndon's book, Life of Lincoln, where Herndon came into the office on a Saturday and discovered that Lincoln had been instructed by Mary to take those 2 brats and get out of here. So Lincoln naturally goes to his office, takes off his boots, lays down on the couch and starts reading the newspaper and allows the kids to run absolutely wild.
Oh, I've heard that he just hated to discipline the boys.
This is one of the scenes that the historians insisted that we not be historically accurate, because we didn't just read Herndon's book, we went back to the original manuscript and found that the boys were actually, in addition to everything you see them doing here, they were actually doing one more thing that doesn't look good in print, and it got left out of Herndon's book. But the historians said, no, that's a little too accurate to history, and we won't talk any more about that right now.
Let me ask you a question about your own research in this field. You know, you do all kinds of projects. You have offices around the world, and you do projects of all different kinds. Were you a Lincoln historian or aficionado before you got involved with this, and you just had to play catch up real quick?
No, to a tremendous extent, we We really treasure the fact that we are not experts. We come into these things with the point of view of the audience. We really are not experts. So as a result, we're always given experts. For example, when we did a thing for NASA about what it was like to stand on the surface of the moon, we're not reading books about it. We're sitting across the table from Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. And so we're always surrounded by the world's greatest experts. In this case, 36 of the world's leading Lincoln scholars. And oh, by the way, you don't get to be one of the world's leading Lincoln scholars by agreeing with the other Lincoln scholars. So getting them together was always fun. But in addition to that, we had 3 inspired Illinois school teachers, chosen because they were the teachers that were consistently producing winners at the Illinois State History Fair. So they, together with our historical advisors, came up with most of the advice about not just what we should be talking about, but also how to engage young people, especially 7th graders. Such an important period in the formation of when kids decide what they like or don't like. So in things like this, we're constantly looking not necessarily for the moment that the historians find most interesting, but rather that the public is going to find most interesting. Because our idea is not to give the public a PhD, that would be kind of boring actually, but rather to show the public the way into the material, show them how Lincoln's life is in many ways experienced many of the same things they did, so that they can relate to the story. Over here, I want to show you a small detail everyone misses. This represents some of the Lincoln-Douglas debates, and if you read the plaque copy here, it says, let's see, where is it? I'm going to find it here. Lincoln joked that the popular sovereignty theme was thin gruel, indeed akin to the homeopathic soup made by boiling the shadow of a pigeon that had starved to death. And so, I'm not sure if you can see it, but sitting up there on the ledge, there's a pigeon looking curiously down here at them. It's just a small detail that most people will miss.
Knox College, of course, that was just north of here. One of the debates, and Stephen Douglas, the sitting senator, was they were famous for their 8 debates around the state.
One of the things we were constantly trying to do is turning the museum inside out. That is to say, doing things within the museum that would point out to people that the real place is only a few miles from here, and so that we hopefully take an initial interest that was generated by your visit here and turning it into a visit to the real place where the real history happened, which is all around central Illinois. It's one of the great treasures of Illinois.
Bob, we have made our way onto the White House, and as fate would have it, as soon as Lincoln becomes president, of course, the war breaks out.
Yes.
And so these generals are standing on the portico at the portico of the White House.
Absolutely. And here, I'm going to sort of deconstruct this a little bit for you, but here the attention to detail, as you can see, McClellan is trying so hard with his posture to be taller than Grant, because these two are rivals. And if you just look at the way that McClellan is holding the cup, he's holding it the way that my wife would tell me to hold a cup.
Down at your stomach.
Whereas Grant is holding his cup the way that I would hold the cup. He's not using the handle. He's got his hand around the cup, and he has the saucer down here at his side. Very, very much more rough-hewn and more rough and ready, so that the personality of the two generals comes out in the way that they're standing and the way that they're looking at each other.
And if you look at the expression on Grant's face, he looks very dubious about this character, doesn't he?
Well, he also looks like he really doesn't care, whereas McClellan is looking very, very suspiciously at him and has his chin upraised and has his shoulders thrown back, trying to be the silverback gorilla that's somehow larger and more powerful than Grant. But ultimately, it's Grant who wins the war, not McClellan.
And then before you walk into the White House, lurking by one of the pillars here behind the family, as you see them when you walk into the atrium here, is the man who would eventually end Lincoln's life.
John Wilkes Booth. And we liked the fact that John Wilkes Booth was positioned behind Lincoln, looking at his back, because of course the assassination would happen in just that way.
Wow. Oh, that's
Let's move into the White House.
That's kind of spooky when you think about it.
We're starting here a series of rooms that contradict each other. In this first room, which is a reminiscent of the Blue Room in the White House, you see Mary seemingly about to greet you, and it's as though she is powerful, and here is the seat of power, the White House. But as you move around to the side, you see that Mrs. Keckley, her seamstress, who was a genius of fashion at the time, is adjusting the back of Mary's dress. So this is actually a fitting. And if you look carefully, you can look underneath to see that her bloomers are exposed. So all of a sudden, Mary goes from being all-powerful to somehow very, very vulnerable. And here behind her are not Mary's ball gowns, but the ball gowns of her social rivals, who are all thinner, younger, more beautiful, more accomplished, and frankly, probably better dressed than Mary, no matter what Mary does. So it initially starts out, Mary feels powerful, and then the contradiction comes, she's not powerful, she's powerless and very vulnerable.
Wow. So that sort of feeds into the public's view of Mary and the reason she spent so much money at the White House. She was trying to make up for her, what, insufficiencies or
well,
her
yes,
weaknesses?
she was from that provincial far western location of Illinois, and so and for that reason, because she was not, neither she nor Abraham were part of the Eastern Blue Bloods, they were constantly felt the need to kind of overcome that. So Mary has gone from powerful to powerless, and similarly, Abe Lincoln goes from powerful to powerless. In the very next gallery, we have the firing on Fort Sumter as the nation falls apart. So now the president looks powerless. And this is followed by the Whispering Gallery, which is a haunted nightmare of all of the bad things said about the Lincolns. If you read some of the things, especially on the last wall, they are purely awful. They are things that no one would say about the president or the first lady today.
And we think we're so uncivil today, but that's not really the case in politics, is it? It was always nasty, huh?
At the dedication, George W. Bush spoke, and then he got a brief tour. They got him to this room, and I'm told they could not get him to move on. He was reading everything in this room.
And look at the design of the frames. Look how a kilter everything. Nothing's
absolutely.
Everything's off center and
exactly. It's very much like a haunted house or the cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It's a nightmare. So it's very non-literal. We've had two fairly literal rooms. Then we go to this non-literal room.
Yeah.
And then following this, we contradict ourselves once again. A complete change of appearance. Here we have almost a 100% accurate one-for-one duplication of the Prince of Wales room at the time, which is where the Lincoln bed that currently today is in the Lincoln bedroom. But at the time it was the bed in which Willie lay sick during one of the greatest parties ever thrown in the White House. And this is a real tragedy because the Lincolns wanted to show the world that the White House was not under siege because of the Civil War, that there was life and there was strength, and so they planned this, what remains today one of the most lavish parties ever thrown at the White House. And then their boy got sick. And the doctors assured them, they thought about canceling the party, but the doctors assured them that he would be fine. And then on the night of the actual party, with the dinner music and the laughter and the champagne going, he falls deathly ill and passes away a couple of weeks later. And the Lincolns are later then severely criticized in the press for partying while their son was dying, the opposite of what they were trying to do. So here on what should have been Mary's night of social redemption, it turns in once again to yet another nightmare for the Lincolns. Now what we're seeing in this contradiction of one room to the next, what we're seeing is the way that we're resetting the audience's attention span. Each time they go into a brand new environment and everything changes, it resets that attention span clock so that we get a fresh start.
Bob, the cabinet meetings must have been anything but orderly affairs, I would think.
Absolutely. When we studied getting ready for this, we went to a lot of other presidential libraries, and every single one had a reproduction of the Oval Office. And in every single one, absolutely nothing was happening. It was generic, it was vanilla, it was dry. So we said, we're going to do Lincoln's office, which is the room that today is the Lincoln bedroom. But we're going to do Lincoln's office, and we're going to put it in the middle of something very animated. Here, this is what we think is probably very close to the first reading of the Emancipation Proclamation. Unlike the painting that Carpenter did, the White House painter, a year or so later, this shows that just about everybody in Lincoln's cabinet absolutely hated the idea. Some thought the timing was absolutely wrong. Some thought it went too far. Some thought it did not go far enough because they said if you do this weak little thing now, you won't be able to do something stronger later. So they absolutely all tore it apart, and this is what we believe might have been their reactions individually. And you can read about them each, what their thoughts were about the Emancipation Proclamation. But this brings the Lincoln story to life. It shows that, like even a modern president, he is trying to lead in the middle of all kinds of vicious debate and dissension.
And look at Lincoln's fist. It looks like he knows where he's going with this, regardless of what they think about it, doesn't it?
Yeah. I particularly like Seward's figure there. He's the one scratching his chin, listening, thinking, okay, what can we do with this? And then a couple of other guys going, oh, I am so resigned.
They've just given up. Yeah, they've just given up.
One note pointing out that Kentucky will certainly join the South if we free their slaves, et cetera, et cetera. So each one has a point of view, and this was what brings history to life. It makes it real. It makes it very much like the problems that a president faces today.
Yeah. Again, we mentioned fate, Bob, as fate would have it again. Just days after the war ends, Abraham Lincoln becomes the victim of an assassination, and we can see John Wilkes Booth sneaking into his box at Ford's Theater, and he and Mary finally have a chance to relax, but it wasn't to be, was it?
No, and yet another horrible thing happens to Mary. During her lifetime, she sees 3 of her 4 children die, and she has her husband is shot probably while either she's holding his arm or while they're holding hands. So it's a tragic, terrible day. And as a result, Lincoln, who was extremely unpopular as a president, he was not just hated by the people of the South, but most people in the North thought his presidency was a tragic mistake. As a result of being assassinated on Good Friday, right at the height of his victory, he ascends and almost becomes a rock star at that point. And people steal coffin handles, they steal decorations from his funeral, they steal flowers, and we have many of these things in our collection today.
Yeah. How tragic that it would take something like his assassination, though, to make him seem like a beloved figure to people.
To make people suddenly finally realize what they had.
Well, Bob, after weeks on the road, his casket on a train crossing the country, he ends up here in Springfield at the House of Representatives in the old state capitol. And what a glorious funeral. You're
looking at an illustration from, I believe it's from Harper's at the time, showing exactly how they had redecorated the room. Now, the real place where this actually happened is only a block from where we're standing right now. But the real place is decorated in a generic way, as if nothing is happening there. Whereas here, we can take you into one specific moment in time, a dramatic moment here for Lincoln's funeral.
And as we walk through here, we lose some of the effect because you really have to be here to see it. But
absolutely, and the emotional effect is also another thing that you don't get, because our visitors, and when your viewers come to visit, they will have walked through Lincoln's life at this point, and now it is as though they are attending his funeral. And it becomes deeply, deeply moving. And that, again, is part of the emotional strategy to try to connect viewers permanently to the life and times of Abraham Lincoln.
And George Washington behind, and there's notice of him being the father, Washington the father, on the ceiling.
That's right. And this is all based very, very extremely closely, as close as possible, to the actual descriptions at the time of what was done. at the funeral with every possible detail in place.
Bob, you work all over the world, but you do get a chance to come back to your creations once in a while. When you come to
Absolutely.
the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Museum, does it stir your heart? What goes on inside?
Absolutely. It's filled with memories of the people that we worked with. And mostly when I come back here, I feel so incredibly grateful. I feel so grateful to the people like Julie Cellini, who is probably the mother of this place. And the work that she did, pounding her head against a brick wall for about 20 years before it got any traction at all. I feel grateful for all the things she did, all the things people like Susan Mogerman and Tom Schwartz, who was our state historian here at the time, or Bob Coomer, some of the others that contributed to this. And also tremendously grateful. Every chance I get, I say thank you to not only those people that helped create this place in the first place, but also to the staff that runs this and to the volunteers that work here for free out of pure love. They're the people that have to make and bake the magic fresh daily and serve it one person at a time. And they make a huge difference in the way that visitors feel here. And all I can do when I come back is just say thank you.
Julie, Bob Rogers says that you're the mother of this museum.
Wow.
And you beat your head against a wall for years and years, and you didn't give up. And he says you're largely one of the people who's largely responsible. So congratulations on 10 years of this museum. How's it feel when you come in here?
It still feels brand new. It still feels like, wow, it took an army of people. It was never a one-person thing. We just to get the funding, to get people to understand that, yes, we should tell the whole Lincoln story, and we should do it in Lincoln's hometown, and we should put it where Lincoln walked to work. Just to push that idea over all those years and through all those setbacks, and when all else fails, it sounds corny, but we'd all think, what would Lincoln do? He'd keep persevering.
Yeah.
So we persevered.
Yeah. He had a long slog, you had a long slog. In the end, it worked out, didn't it?
I think it maybe even surpassed our expectations. We knew we had picked the right person to do it, BRC Imagination Arts, Bob Rogers. We looked at the whole landscape of people who were doing major museums in the United States at that time. All the speculation was that we would pick Ralph Applebaum, who had just very successfully done the Holocaust Museum in Washington. We all trekked out there, we were very impressed, but we looked at a lot of other sites as well, and what we really zeroed in on is Illinois, Springfield has the best story in all of American history, and that's Abraham Lincoln. And so we looked for the best storytellers, and that's how we picked BRC.
Well, Julie, thank you so much, and congratulations.
Thank you.
We were fortunate to get our behind-the-scenes tour with Bob Rogers early in the morning before the museum opened. As you can see, after 10 years, it has not lost its popularity. With another Illinois story in Springfield at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Museum, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send $19.95 to Network Knowledge, P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.